Okay, first on the agenda is public input. Are there any members of the public who have called in?
There is a member of the public here, but they don't seem to be saying anything.
Call-in user 2, can you identify yourself? Okay, and if you're not speaking, please put your lines on mute to reduce the background noise.
Kate, can I tell any public that are watching the 2 ways to comment?
Correct. Please do so, and then I'll have Luann let us know if there is any.
So there are 2 ways to connect a comment to the meeting, and if you send an email to us, it would be at PC, which stands for public comment, at guilderlandlibrary.org, pc@guilderlandlibrary.org, or during the public comment period at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, you can call a number to get access to the meeting. And that number is area code 408-418-9388. And then you have to enter a 10-digit access code to enter this meeting. I will repeat, I'll say that, and then I'll repeat both the number and the access code. 132-445-2681. So again, if you want to call, it's 408-418-9388. And then you enter the access code 132-445-2681. And again, you can email PC for public comment at guilderlandlibrary.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Luann, is there any public comment that has been received as of yet?
Yes, we do have 2 comments.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and read those. The first one says, would the board like to be invited into the building to see the progress we have made to make the library safer and socially distant? And by the way, this is coming from a staff member. Some may have not been inside since March, and I think it's important that the board gets an opportunity to see the library in its current new state before we let the public in. It might also give them a refresher of the building layout when talking about the next phase of the construction process. So that's the first comment. Do you want me to read the second one, or you want to just...
Please, no, go ahead, read the...
Go right ahead. Yep. Okay. The second one is, with the library moving forward with the construction, maybe the decision about the existing furniture, example, large cube chairs, should be discussed now on how those furniture pieces are going to retire. I know we are slated to get updated furniture, but if we were to reopen to the public, all the furniture that is existing would have to be moved. We want people to browse the collection and not get cozy in the stacks. If we have a plan for the furniture before we reopen the library to the public, we only have to move the bulk of it all at once instead of multiple times and figure out storage with limited maintenance staff. So again, that was from a staff member.
Okay. Thank you, Luann. Was there any public who've joined the meeting or made comment since Tim has given the information out?
No, that's it for now.
And call-in user 2, was there anything that wanted to add? Okay.
You know, I wonder if call-in user 2 is Megan Brennan.
Oh, it is. I'm so sorry. I thought the caller ID would show me.
Okay.
Okay.
So we do have both members of the both architects from Butler, Rowland, and Mays that are working with us. Megan Brennan and Paul Mays are with us as well.
All right. So Board members, before we open the floor to the proposal to continue with an expanded curbside pickup and keep the building closed to the public for the duration of the renovation, I want to ensure that everyone's questions are answered, as I know that there are many. In order to do this, I think we should start with questions first for the architects and the director that we have available to us. And then after all the questions are answered, you know, we can move on to our lively discussion that I'm sure will ensue. But for the sake of time and being able to have a debate with the most information, I want to start with like a question and answer period of the board to our panel of experts. And I know that Kathy was involved in a meeting, and you know, this is a brainchild of our director. So Tim, do you want to start with a little bit about the proposal and then what's been going on these past couple of days, and then we'll have Kathy give her feedback from the meeting. Then we'll open it up to questions from the board.
Sure. I'll try not to be too repetitive and speak too long, because I know I can do that. You know, my two main challenges right now are reopening safely and getting the new building built. And I believe on on Tuesday night last week, it occurred to me, this whole concept occurred to me. So I woke up in the morning and I called Megan from the architect, and this with her, and she thought it was an idea worthy of being discussed. So then I called Caitlin and discussed it with her, same response. Then a meeting was scheduled that included myself and Kathy Barber as meeting chair, Margaret Garrett from the library, Megan from the architect's office, and Larry Toon, the construction manager from Turner Engineering. And we talked through the idea a little bit and decided that it was worthy of full board consideration. By this time, it's late in the day, Thursday, or sometime on Friday. So I have lost track of when I emailed all of you with a summary of the idea. But, you know, at that point, Megan had us create a poll for your on Monday or Tuesday. It is a time-sensitive idea. We can ask the architects a little bit more about that, but the bid documents were supposed to be released today, and I held them up for at least one day, because why release them if you might have to amend them tomorrow? But the success of the project, whichever approach we take, is dependent, the success of the project, that's not the right term. The timely completion of the project, no matter which of these two approaches we take, is dependent on breaking ground before winter weather and getting the new building portion itself built, so that workers can then work inside throughout the whole winter. That might not happen because of weather, and it might not happen because of bidding delays. So for example, we did a smaller project on the loading dock a few years ago. It was my first construction project, and we had to bid it twice. The first time we got no bidders at all. The second time we got one bidder who bid 3 times the project budget that the engineer had given for us. So then we had to bid that a third time in order to successfully bid that job. I don't think something like that is going to happen, but that's why there's a little bit of a sense of urgency about this. I don't believe a decision that can wait very long. We are a little bit hamstrung tonight. We should have Larry Toon, our construction manager from Turner Construction, with us, but he and John, who's his assistant, are both on vacation until Tuesday, September 8th. So some of our questions we will not get answers to until a little later. And we'll try to make those clear as we go along here. This is my idea, but I have mentioned to several board members in the last couple of days, I'm fine either way. I think this is an idea worth considering. The day before I had this idea, I think the previous approach was just fine with me too. So I'm not involved in this in an ego sense. I just think we should discuss it because it has the potential to save a significant amount of time and therefore a significant amount of money. And it also keeps, and I know we differ in opinions on this, but it's going to be undeniably safer in a virus than an opening would be it. There's where my two streams of thought dovetail.
Okay, I guess you wanted me to talk about the call as well?
Sure. Kathy is the chair of our two most relevant committees, our long range plan, our building and grounds, and I believe the expansion. So Kathy was involved in this meeting, and so I'd love you to share as the committee chair your 2 cents.
Sure. I just had a few notes about just what we talked about. It was a little difficult to pin down what the actual timeline on the project might look like without patrons or with patrons. But I know that they mentioned a few things that I guess would be easier to do without the library being open. Less need for false walls to wall off the construction project from people in the library. I guess they could open up the whole ceiling to do work there without doing piecemeal. And there was also just the idea that might be more attractive to bidders if there weren't people in the building. But the savings really couldn't really be quantified, at least not at that meeting. It was just kind of a list of things that were possibly going to be less expensive, possibly. I think definitely something like the false walls, I guess, would have a specific cost probably, or more of a ballpark, but we didn't really get into that too much in this meeting. And as Tim mentioned, the timeline is subject to things like weather, and also if there should be, say, a COVID outbreak or a COVID positive case in the construction workers or something like that, then they might have to have a delay and quarantine people, and so that those things are really it's really difficult to say. I mean, I think I said it like it depends, and it's hard to say exactly what would be saved and what and whether the timeline would be a lot shorter or what. So and it's we also had a discussion about using the large meeting room. I don't for patrons to come into, but it would require building an extra sidewalk outside so that they could come in and out, and I guess one way in and one way out or something like that, or maybe they'd come in from outside. I can't exactly recall, but that was discussed as a possibility for bringing people into the library, but obviously it wouldn't be really being in the stacks of the library. It would be being in the room and whatever is able to be placed in the room. So that was what we talked about. We talked about the capacity of the library with construction workers and staff as counting as a, I guess you'd say, the number of people in the library. And I don't think it was clear during the call what our actual capacity of the library would be, because it has to be a percentage of that. I think like maybe 25% or something like that, for the rules that we have now. So I wasn't quite sure what exactly that would entail if we wanted to have people in the library while the construction was going on, how many people we could accommodate. So that was really, I think that's what I have on the meeting. Obviously, I'm not getting everything. Oh, and there was also the question of if we had savings, there were other things we wanted to do. Like we wanted to do some other, I'm thinking skylight and a heated floor and a room for pipes, and I'm missing something. So I can't remember exactly what, but there was something discussed about potentially if you have savings that you could do these other things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to do. So I
Thank
don't
you,
know.
Kathy.
Okay.
Who was there any staff present at the meeting?
Margaret Garrett was there. Kate, I just found out that we need to give a little more information to people who want to call in. There's another 4-digit number called an attendee ID that they will need to enter, and that is 1234. So Luann is doing her best during the meeting to adjust that on Facebook and on our website. But if any members of the public are listening or watching and had tried to call in, at the end of the meeting, there'll be another call-in period. So you'll dial the phone number that I gave you before and then enter the 10-digit meeting ID that I gave you before. And then lastly, punch in an attendee ID, which is 1234. So back to you, Kate. Margaret was the only staff member besides me that was at that meeting.
Hey, Tim, could you
Okay,
speak
thank
on
you, Tim. I'm
I said, could you repeat?
sorry, what was that, Barbara?
Could Tim repeat the numbers for those that have just tuned in?
Sure. So if you want to comment in the public comment period, which now will take place at the end of the meeting, the first one already took place, you can email PC as in public comment at guilderlandlibrary.org, or you can take down these numbers and I'll read them all twice. The phone number is 408-418-9388. Then you enter a 10-digit access code, which is 132-445-2681. And then you'll be asked for an attendee ID, which is 1234. And then let's repeat those. The phone number, 408-418-9388. The access code, 10 digits, 132-445-2681, and the attendee ID 1234. Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. So I know that there are a lot of questions, and virtual meetings are notoriously difficult to maintain order anyway. So it's up to you guys if we, I can go in an order and ask someone if they have a question and just go, round robin one at a time, or, we can do raise hands and get called on. It's up to the board how you guys want to proceed. I think those are our two best options. Noreen.
Caitlin, just quickly to add on to Kathy's list that she was making of things that we can set aside for if there was money left over, can I complete the list? She was missing a couple of items, if that's okay before we begin.
Sure, that would be fine.
Kathy, you had mentioned the skylight in the children's area, the heated floor for the children's room. Also, a water service entry room outside Helderberg is what I have on my list. A better communication system for fire alarm system, and an outdoor plaza in the front, I guess, of the library, just so callers coming in can know what the 5 things on the list are.
Thank you, Noreen. Paul Mays.
Thank you. I just wanted to explain very briefly or clarify the 5 items that were just discussed that Noreen summarized are what are called alternates. In the strategy of bidding a project, alternates are the features of the project that we can set aside because they are discrete pieces that can either be done or not done and not affect the overall project. So if we find, for example, that the budget is very tight and time is running and we need to sign contracts, we don't have to accept all of those alternates. They would be options that we could either defer until such time as the money's available to do them, or not accept them at all. On the other hand, if the bids come in as Turner has budgeted and expects them, they will be part of the project. So I just wanted to clarify, they're not, it's not that they're unaffordable at the moment. We'll know more when bids are received, of course. They are in the Turner budget, but they are a means by which we protect the budget so that we don't get bids in, find out we're over budget, and have to rebid the whole thing. We can proceed leaving these pieces out and then add them in later as budget permits. For clarity, the 5 items, the skylight in the children's room would be a lovely feature, and it adds a lot to the children's room. But you can imagine it could also be a ceiling without a skylight. The second item was the radiant slab. This is a heated slab in the activity area of the children's room. We find it's very beneficial for especially the youngest patrons and their families when they sit on the floor, but again, not an absolute necessity, but something we can add as a feature. The third item is the sprinkler room. That's the piping room you were referring to, Noreen. We, instead of putting the sprinkler apparatus in a closet area as it's designed right now, which would take away a little bit of storage, we could build a separate exterior, a small addition for it, and it wouldn't take any storage away. So we have an option either way, but it would save storage room. The fourth item was a fire alarm system upgrade. Obviously, the addition gets all new fire alarm. The areas we're renovating, but this is the bones of the system. Some pieces that are from the original system that could be upgraded to bring everything up to a brand new level. Again, not required by code, but it is something that if we could do it now, we should. And the last item was the reading plazas. These are outside the cafe area. It's not that we wouldn't want to do them, but they are a piece that, again, could be retrofit at a later time. So I just wanted to explain they are in Turner's budget, but we make sure that they're listed as options so that we get a number and then decide as a group, can we afford to do it now or should we hold off on those?
Thank you, Paul. So Tim had a hand raised. I just want to remind everybody the means to the end tonight that we're trying to get at is whether we are going to bid this project as being in a space that's open to the public or in a space that is closed to the public. So let's try and stay as much on point as getting to the answer to that question as we can. And then I have Tim, and then I have Barbara, Brian, and Richard. Hold on.
I'm good.
I just want to acknowledge Barbara, Brian, and Richard with questions.
Okay. I'm good at the moment.
Okay, Barbara, you had a question. You're on.
Wasn't so much a question as a comment.
Barbara, we're doing questions first. We're starting with all questions so everyone gets them answered, and then we'll do some comments at the end to make sure we have time for the people here, everyone present, to get questions answered.
She led off the meeting and said that we're gonna do questions and then we can do comments and opinions after.
Barbara, Brian, Richard, Peter, Kathy. So, Brian,
Okay.
question?
I have several questions. I don't know how you want me to proceed with this, so I'll just start firing until you tell me to stop, and then hopefully we can get back to me.
Wait,
Paul,
Brian,
Megan, thank you guys.
Do you want someone to answer a question one at a time, or do you want to do all of your questions first?
No, one at a time is good.
Okay.
So Paul, Megan, thanks for being here as always. We appreciate it. So I guess the biggest question would be is the cost savings. I know this wasn't clear before the meeting. I didn't know if there was any sort of clarification or ideas or thoughts since the previous meeting.
Unfortunately, that's something that will have to come from Turner, and with the two of them gone today, we don't have a quantifiable number for you. Our gut reaction is it probably saves about a month of construction time. That's Megan and I just sort of based on our experience thinking. The number is a harder one because it really has more to do with the overhead of doing the work. In other words, every night they don't have to lock all their tools up and close everything away and build these temporary partitions. They have free run of the place. There is a savings to that, but what that number is, I would really be hesitant to say without Turner, since they did the budget. And I'm not trying to be coy. It's just we don't have that information tonight.
I totally understand. You don't want to say, a number that you don't know. I totally understand that. Okay, so you mentioned that it would be done probably 4 weeks earlier. So, and I know you've told us this before, but can you just walk us through your thought of the timeline? So because I pulled up an old timeline, but this is an older one, and it turns out we're ahead of schedule according to our old timeline, which is great. But so if we were to do it the without expediting it, when did you see us finishing, and then when do you see us finishing if we expedite it?
Right, Megan, may I ask you to jump in here? You've looked at the schedule more recently than I, but I can answer if you don't have a specific answer. Is Megan still with us?
She's on mute, it looks like.
Megan's on mute.
I don't know if she can unmute herself. What's the process for that?
Oh,
She can.
So referencing the Turner presentation from last week at the board meeting, they were anticipating that construction would be complete at the end of August of next year, so 1 year from now.
To August 2021?
Yes.
And then,
Okay.
so if it's 4 weeks, we're looking at the library would be closed for conservatively. It'll open July, so that would be like 11 months. Be closed.
Give or take, yes.
Yeah, of course. And so certainly, like, I appreciate that. Any sort there are contingencies, but my feeling is any sort of problem would be a problem whether we did it either way. So if COVID hits, like it's
True.
If there's a problem, it's going to be the same. So it should be a wash. So that's my feeling ahead of time. So we don't need to ever preface it with me, at least. Okay. There's another question. I don't know if we're going to know the answer, but so say if we see a significant cost savings, so somehow we find out a number, and it turns out we're going to save $1 million. It's $1 million cheaper than when we originally anticipated. Is this something that we can use to pay off the bond? Where can we make this savings, or are we just going to, or is our only option to spend more money to make do more stuff at the library? I know you're probably the best to answer this, although I know it's certainly not in your wheelhouse.
Right. Well, no, we've experienced this before. So the short answer is you would then have some decisions to make as a board of trustees. What most often happens is the final bond is not issued until the total project costs are known. So the initial bond is actually done as something called a BAN, a bond anticipatory note, meaning we temporarily borrow the money until we know what the final numbers are, which is after construction begins, so that we have a handle on what change orders there might be or what things have modified. And then just like refinancing your house, the BAN gets rolled into the overall bond. The advantage to that is you only borrow the money you actually need. If you come in, as you explained, under budget, then you don't borrow the extra money that you don't need. It's been approved by the taxpayers. You can't borrow more than that money, but you can borrow less than that money. The other option, and some libraries choose this, is to do a hybrid or as you say, you could spend some more money to upgrade some things that you might not otherwise have been able to, as long as they're within the scope of the project. You can't all of a sudden add another addition, for example, but we could upgrade things within the addition or take an alternate, for example, that we might not have taken otherwise. And then, as I say, some libraries might do a hybrid of the two, borrow less, but still do one or two things more. It becomes a decision on your part about the best way to use that budget. But to answer your question, it's not that you would use it to pay back the bond early. You probably wouldn't borrow it in the first place.
Perfect. Thank you. Lost my train of thought. Caitlin, can you come back to me? I gotta remember this question, and I want to let other people a couple chances to ask some questions.
I will, and
Thank you for calling, Megan.
next up I had Richard.
And I'm actually okay at this point, so thank you.
You're welcome. Peter.
I guess just to ask again, what was said is that there's no guarantee, am I correct? There's no guarantee that we'll save money, and we might not save time dependent on what happens with weather conditions, COVID-related things. So there might actually be no savings at all or time reduction. Is that correct?
If you'd like me to answer that.
Yeah, Paul. Yep.
Certainly the vagaries of what will happen with the pandemic or the weather are things that can't be predicted. You could say that using this strategy might hedge your bets a little more in terms of giving you a little more freedom, so that even if it did, let's say, go over, now you're not behind schedule, but you're back on the original schedule. But you're absolutely right. There's no guarantee. And since we didn't do the budget, I'm not comfortable saying what the number savings would be. I'm not even sure if Turner could give you an exact number on that at the moment. But you're right. There's no guarantee either way. That's absolutely true.
And then one last question. I guess this is, Tim, maybe if you can kind of chime in on this, and Paul, you might even be able to say something as well. But when we went through all our meetings with residents of the town and the different ways that we did it, and also through social media or through media platforms as far as papers, things like that, we did kind of pledge to the residents of Guilderland that we would try to remain open during the whole entire process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my two questions.
I'll just go a little further with that and say, yes, we did repeatedly. We did it in print. We did it in meetings. And we made the assumption that people would like their library services disrupted as little as possible. I'm going to just say the next part, which has been said to me by a number of you in the last couple of days, which is that nobody, of course, was predicting this extended societal closure due to coronavirus. And, it seems like potentially a bit of a game changer for you guys as decision makers to consider. And that I'm not stating it very well, but there are people on this call who have interesting perspectives on that they may wish to share at some point.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. The only thing I would add is that it is actually the COVID variable that made this something to consider in a way. In other words, I don't know that I would feel as comfortable with it based on what we just talked about. The fact that we had always said the intention was, as Peter mentioned, to leave the library open. That was certainly something we always discussed. But now, because you have been closed to regular service for a period of time, that's when it became something to think about, in that, does it mean that we struggle to try and find an opening date, get back opened up, and then still have a very unusual circumstance, something that isn't part of the normal service of the library, and then have to shut down periodically during construction for a small period, which was always going to be the case, but not for the whole time. In other words, are we racing to try and accommodate something that is going to be difficult to accommodate anyway? If we hadn't been on this partial shutdown I don't know that this would have even been that big a discussion. We probably would have said, no, we've always planned it. It's built into the budget. Let's just do it this way. But given that you have shut down for a while, that people are used to, in some ways, this inconvenience, if it saves the institution some money and some time, it may be worth considering as an extension of that inconvenience rather than introducing a new inconvenience all at once, if any of that makes sense to you. Okay.
Sorry, I've got Kathy. Go back to Brian, and I see Barbara after that. So Kathy?
My question is more, is this we're closed until the end of the construction, or we're open during the construction all the time? I mean, is there like a compromise or a kind of a hybrid, like we let the construction proceed without patrons for 6 months, and then we have a date certain that we're gonna, like, say we're gonna open the library on March 1st, and we can tell people that. So we have like 6 months to plan it, and they could do what they're gonna do for 6 months without patrons. But then we say on that date, we're gonna open the library. I mean, is that workable? Is that, I mean, because it seems like we're just discussing either we're all open or all closed. So does it have to be that way?
I'll try to tackle that for you, Kathy. You're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be a black or white question. There may be a middle ground there. I would say that it does complicate things. In other words, one of the advantages you would gain by bidding it this way, and Megan and I were ready to put the project on the street, but with the Turner folks on vacation and this question out there, we can still put it out and then add by addendum what the schedule's going to be. So there is time to make that adjustment. But the advantage you get to bidding the project without the constriction of having occupancy of the building is that contractors know they have free rein. If we do try to attempt the hybrid, it is possible, but what I can imagine is a contractor thinking, I'm still under the gun, I still need to be done by this time, and I may still be working in an occupied building to try and finish the project up. And so it takes away that clarity that might have lowered their price. So I would guess that in doing it as a hybrid, you might undermine the advantages that you would have gained by not doing it that way, or by doing it as a complete, we're going to only do curbside service during the course of this. And I wanted to be clear about that. The intention is still to leave the large meeting space and the curbside service all operative. It's not that the library would be closed completely, but it's just that the main stacks areas and the public areas, we wouldn't be working around them. So short answer is yes, I'm sure we could do some sort of hybrid, but I would guess that you would lose proportionately more of the advantage than you'd actually gain by doing it. That's the cynic in me. Sorry. Did that answer your question?
Somewhat. I mean, I guess my thought was, we subject our budget to the public, and that would be during a time when the library would not be available, for potentially until a year from today, or even longer than that. And we don't really know what the COVID situation is going to be in the spring. I mean, it may be that it's under control and everybody's doing everything sort of similarly, except that they can't come to the Guilderland Library. So I guess just from our standpoint of how does that work? Do people, how loyal are people in terms of like waiting that long, especially if they don't feel that they need to be as careful anymore because maybe COVID is under control. I mean, that's just a question that I had because,
Yep.
you know, the public they vote on our,
Sure.
so, and if they can't use, I don't know, not everybody is into curbside service. Maybe, I mean,
Right.
myself, I like to browse, but you know, that's just me. So
It might be worthwhile asking Tim, for example, I don't know if you have the numbers available, but what sort of proportion of usage have you seen using curbside service or your peers? Or, you know, we could also ask Colony and so forth as well.
Sure. So a lot of directions I can take that in. I'll try to be fast again. I want to be very clear to the board and to any staff that are watching, and I am talking with staff tomorrow in a all-staff meeting, that this proposal would involve greatly expanding the hours of curbside service, certainly to include Saturdays, possibly to include Sundays. It would involve, once I can figure out the occupancy issue, which is I'm very close to resolving, it would involve probably bringing back the full staff as opposed to the 2 teams, because that appears to me to be likely, but I can't be sure yet. And the concept of having one or both meeting rooms stocked with material that people might want to browse is certainly a possibility. So we can, you know, there's a lot of work to make that happen, but we could deliver a library that does curbside service for those that want it, and that has a significant amount of space for browsing material in those one or both meeting rooms. Brief elaboration of that, that Kathy mentioned earlier, the Helderberg room has 2 doors to the outside. And so therefore it could be configured so that people enter through one door, leave through the other door, and follow a prescribed route through the building, like a lot of shops are doing. But it would require probably the loss of some bushes and shrubbery, hopefully not the big tree. And I don't know the term for this, but I've often seen, like if you're, bear with me here, but let's say you're at the Altamont Fair, okay? And there's a big truck that unloaded a Ferris wheel, and a bunch of power cords come out of that truck and run across the ground and power the Ferris wheel, okay? And there's this like gray plastic stuff that can be laid down that's sort of a temporary sidewalk. And so we could try to make that safe and ADA compliant to do a browsing room for patrons as well. I want to be clear again to the board especially that I think the expanded curbside would come first. And it can only expand once I figure out the occupancy issue, which I will be happy to address later if someone asks me about it. But we got a sense from our last board meeting that there's significant support for offering more service in the curbside vein at different times than we're offering it now. So trying to get that done would be the first step. And then if possible, creating that browsing concept, which I think should be possible, but I don't know for sure. It is possible based on the building. The building works for that. So that's the stuff I wanted to add there.
All right, thank you, Tim. Kathy, have your questions for the moment been answered?
I think so. I mean, I'm just not sure.
Understandable. So do you have more questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, we're circling back to Brian and then Barbara, and then I'll see if there's any others that have come forward. So Brian.
Thank you, Caitlin. So this question is for Paul. So I guess maybe one of the clearest ways to determine if there's a cost savings would be to bid this as both as both ways, as expedited and as a non-expedited. Is that something like that possible? And then when we see the bids, we just choose the one that the board feels is most comfortable, as opposed to choosing a route now. You know, we put it out, both routes out there, and choose both routes. Have you ever heard of that? Is that something possible?
That's a new one on me. I'm sorry. I would have to think about that a little bit. In general, when schedules are put in the front end, meaning the documents that are bid, we want to make them general enough that they allow for the flexibility of what has to happen during construction, but strict enough that they have milestones that are set that we can establish. Is this project moving along correctly, or are we behind or ahead? Particularly because you have multiple prime contractors. So because you're publicly bidding this, you're going to have a general construction, plumbing, mechanical, electrical. So what your suggestion would involve having all of that twice in two different scenarios. I would expect them to find that confusing, and just based on my experience, as sometimes contractors are reviewing bid documents, they have to make certain assumptions. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think, again, sort of what we were saying earlier, if you want to realize the most savings, you should probably commit to the one thing and let them know that's the thing we're doing. If they get a sense that you're hedging, I would guess that they're going to have to hedge their numbers and so forth as well, anticipating that things might change. So
Okay.
I'm sorry I don't have a more definitive
No,
answer.
so I was just, I didn't know if it was something that maybe was more common than I realized, but it sounds like it's not, and your answer makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Okay. So all right, so that was all my questions for you. I do have some for Tim though. Okay, so Tim, if we were to go the route of not opening the building and expanding curbside pickup, would we look at furloughing staff as a way to kind of get more cost savings? I'd have to imagine we wouldn't need our entire staff if we're just doing curbside pickup. Obviously, I don't run it. I don't know much about it. I did try to stop by today to kind of get a sense of, just from the outside, what it looks like. But I'm not in the building. I don't know what that looks like. So is that an option, or has that been kicked around?
Okay. I have not discussed that with anyone, because that, I think, is a board decision. I think that I am very comfortable defending the amount of work that's taking place both in the building and when people are at home. I think that my problem with expanding curbside service right now is that I can't bring enough staff resources to bear on it. My gut is that we're going to need most of those people. We have made a change since the new fiscal year began, where while we are separated into two teams, there are some part-time employees whose jobs are essentially impossible to do from home. So we've stayed within the budget, but we've doubled up, or tried to double up if the employee has availability, the hours that they are in the building during their 2 weeks in, and then they're still at 0 hours or very few hours in the 2 weeks off. A good example is that we have some evening clerks who are state workers, and so they're busy downtown all day and tend to work 5 to 9. So we've got some of those folks coming in on Saturday to make up some of those hours and try to be close to the amount of money that they earned pre-pandemic. I don't think we're hitting it in all cases, but in most cases, we've been able to give people some. So for example, another good example, every year in October for the last 2 or 3 years, we have to review sexual harassment training for the state of New York. So some of those part-time people, they all have to take the training, everybody does. And so some of those part-time people have the opportunity to take that 90-minute training during the weeks that they're at home in order to clock a little bit of hours when they're at home. So I have not discussed furloughs. There is, of course, there are 2 different union contracts, and I'm not up on that particular provision, but I would imagine that, the first call would be to our personnel lawyer to figure out how to make something like that happen if you guys direct it.
Okay. Margaret, if you had, I don't think anyone's ever been around this situation, but maybe, Margaret, would you have any sort of insight? I would undoubtedly believe the union would fight, if we were to go down that path. And this is the first time I'm bringing it up, but do you know is this even conceivable from any knowledge that which is just furlough, union employees like this?
I'm not going to use that word, but I will mention that both CSEA contracts have clauses in it that speak to no strike, no lockouts. So I'm sure this would take some sort of negotiation between the Personnel Committee and CSEA. It's not our interest to, and I think I'm speaking for Tim, not to furlough people. During the emergency closure, when COVID first happened, we continued to pay people. That MOU expired in July, and so now people have to clock their hours, and they're only being paid for the hours worked.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I would just add too that any financial gains that you gained by such a plan would be not obliterated or canceled out, but if you guys go down that road, and I'm trying to speak very carefully because I don't want to appear to be threatening the board, but it will take so much administrative time that we won't be able to administer the construction project, is kind of the way I would put it. I've always said to you guys, sometimes in informal settings, that the library does not have enough administrators to do all the things that New York State charges it with doing. And, a detailed, lengthy negotiation with CSEA will take a lot of time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sorry I think I have kind of one more question. Sorry to kind of.
I have a question for Mark.
Can we?
For Tim.
I've got Brian, then Barbara, and then you, Jason. Can you hold till? I appreciate that. All right.
So I really just have one more, and I don't ask I only ask these because I really don't know what I want to do yet. So sorry. So my last thing is, as I'm thinking about this, a lot of it comes down to what would closing the library, what would doing expedited outside service but no library, no one inside the library look like versus limited opening. Like if there's not going to be much of a difference other than people just walking in and walking out, then to me it would make sense to save some money. But if it's going to look a lot different, then it might be worth doing.
Brian, what's your question?
And so my question is, sorry, do you have like a sense of a plan for reopening and kind of how that would look like compared to what we're kind of currently doing and what expanded would look like? And I know it's a long question. Anything you could do to enlighten me would be appreciated.
Sure. So we have, a published reopening plan that I believe you guys all voted on, but what you're asking, the answer is this. A limited reopening might not look a whole lot different than today's services do. So for example, at another local library, they're taking 15 people in per hour for browsing. I believe they have one of their 30 or so computers available for people to use. I'm not sure about that, and I was admonished by the other library directors after our last board meeting for speaking out of turn about a particular library when I didn't, in fact, know exactly what was going on over there. So I've learned that lesson. But no library that I'm aware of anywhere in New York State is able to hold any public programs or interested in holding any public programs, hosting any community groups in its meeting room. the pretty much the extent of what's happening in our peer libraries that are quote open unquote is people can come in and browse, pick the material up, in most cases go to a self-check machine and check the material out. The library as we know it in its full glory is a while before that can come back. And you know, there's factors I've mentioned to you guys before that you need to just revisit for a moment, okay? So I have one room in the library that has 16 staff members in about I can't remember if it's 500 or 5,000 square feet, but these people work 18 to 24 inches from each other. And I'm prevented from letting that happen anymore by both good health practice and the New York State restrictions. So I have to take those 16 people and find places in the building for them to work if we are reopened. So to me, where I'm coming from, that's a lot easier to do if I've got a browsing room over in the meeting room area and I've got curbside pickup going on. You know, there's some tough nuts to crack here. And you know, I don't know about these libraries that are open. Were they built in such a way that nobody has a workspace 2 feet from somebody else? Maybe. I quite frankly haven't had time to go to any of them to figure out how they're handling that particular issue. I do have a weekly meeting on Fridays with other library directors, so I can ask that question. And I've had staff suggest to me that I go to other libraries to see how their operations are working out. And I think that's a good idea. So,
so actually, that's what I spent today doing, was going to a couple of the libraries that were open, but I'll talk about that later because I know people have questions and I promised Caitlin I would not go on any tirade. So I'm done. I'm done with my questions. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Barbara, you've been ever so patient. You're up. Have the floor for questions as long as you need.
Okay, I have probably 3 questions, one of which has to do with what Tim just talked about. The 16 people that are in that combined room, if we're not having programs in the Helderberg room and the Norman Skill room and all those, could we not move their workspaces to those areas and leave the rest of the library open for browsing? So that's one question.
And the answer is yes. If you do that, that's a good suggestion and kind of a trade-off. So if you have the whole library open for browsing, then you couldn't really do the Norman Skill or Helderberg browsing concept because you'd need to put staff over there. But it's a possibility. But my take on that would be flip that around in your head. If you can let patrons browse in those side rooms and put enough of the collection in there to make people happy, then maybe you can get this cost savings from the rest of the building being closed. So that's kind of where my mind is. I'm not telling you what to think, but you know, I think that there are some people that want to browse and we might be able to take care of them in one or both of those meeting rooms and still protect the staff and the public from the coronavirus and gain this construction cost savings. So that's the way I look at that one.
Sorry about that. Okay, second question. When we put out the notice for the meeting, unless I missed something, we mentioned cost savings, but we didn't say that the library would be closed except for the curbside pickup. And I was wondering, you know, why that was the case, because obviously probably the most important part of this whole thing is, are we going to make the library accessible to our public, as, you know, many of our surrounding libraries are beginning. And I didn't know why that wasn't like the headline. Your library would have to be closed, but there may be some cost savings. And I think Paul has, you know, it's a maybe. We really don't know. So
yep. I'll take that, Barbara, because that's me. I wrote those notices, and I felt that, you know, and I think I'm wrong, as I sit here now, so I'll say I'm wrong publicly here, but I felt that at the moment, this was a board decision, and I didn't want to put too much information about the concept into the public record until the meeting. Whatever decision you guys make, we will obviously be informing the public of what our next steps are as soon as we've got them. But that was my judgment. I guess we disagree. Maybe I should have given a fuller description of the idea, but you got to remember, I am trying to manage not just my relationship to my 11 bosses here, 10 of whom are on this call, but also the expectations of the public and the staff. And to explain that more, other than to say we had an idea for accelerating the construction process to get it done sooner and perhaps save money, seemed to me that it would start a public debate prior to a board meeting, and that's why I made that decision.
Okay, the next question, I guess, is to Paul. Having been involved in a few construction projects, just as a board member, I have, on rare occasions, seen them done on time. So I think to promise the public that we would reopen in August of 2021, about a year from now, is that really a promise we can make?
There are obviously always variables, and in this era at the moment, we have more variables than we would normally have. As was mentioned earlier, if somebody on the workforce, for example, whether it was a contractor or staff, when contractors are in the building that might necessitate quarantining, that's something we haven't had to deal with at all in most projects over time, and weather is always a variable. So can we promise the date? No. But having said that, putting the general schedule into the front end of the contract documents is what establishes for the contractors what is expected of them in terms of the size crews they need and how long they'll have general conditions. Where we can run into trouble is if that starts to run over, as you said, if projects go long, and you have multiple primes, all of whom are contracted to you but not to each other, that's where it gets sticky. When the plumbing contractor says, this project went over, I wasn't planning to be here 14 months, I was only planning to be here 12, but the general contractor took too long, now there's a cost if somebody needs extra. So that's why I was saying earlier, we try to keep it general enough to have some flexibility, but consistent enough to know where the milestones are. I'm more comfortable saying what that end date is for overall construction than I am in the earlier suggestion about a hybrid where we pick a date in the middle of construction to open. Remember, it was I think Kathy brought it up in a great attempt to meet the middle ground, and let's say we sort of cut it in half and have access for the second half of it. I would be more worried about that than an end date for construction. The end date's a little easier to predict overall because you have the whole piece rather than whether the little pieces are done in time. And we also then have to coordinate furniture delivery, the relocation of all the collection back onto the stacks, and all those other pieces. So I'm more comfortable saying that getting all that done at the end is an easier date to predict than what the interim middle date might be to try and make things like that happen at the halfway point. But you've hit on it. There's no guarantee, just as we were saying.
But even if every single thing fell into place, the earliest that we could predict the library opening to the public for browsing would be late August of 2021.
July or August, right? We were saying that we may be able to knock several weeks off, but again, a second wave of COVID might mean that you're not there until 2022. We can't answer that, obviously. But you're right. The best case scenario, if everything fell into place, you're still talking summer of 2021. You're probably not doing the summer reading program at the library in 2021. In some ways, we're going to have to restrict services, even if the library's open. You know, you're not going to have access to the entire structure throughout the entire construction. Even if we do the non-expedited, we'll be shifting things around, so it's going to be inconvenient. But yes, the earliest would be summer 2021. That doesn't change.
So technically, we would have been closed for almost a year and a half, going on 2 years, basically. March to March would be a year and another 6 months.
If you closed for full service,
the
yes,
best-
but you will
best-
have had
right, for the
curbside
best-
service and remote. Yes,
Right.
that's true.
Okay, the next one, Tim teased us with this question, the occupancy. He
Yes.
said that he would answer that. That's another question I have.
We did some occupancy calculations based on the code, which determines the number of occupants per square foot in different types of rooms. But I think that has to be reconciled against the state requirements. So Tim, maybe you can add to that.
Sure, here's where I'm at right now. And it takes a little bit of review. So the first thing is New York State provides libraries no guidance. So the library community chooses to follow retail reopening guidance for phase 2. We have been reading the retail reopening guidance for phase 2 as though it meant that we could have only half of our staff in at any given time. And that may still turn out to be true. But at our board meeting a week or two ago, I was told to look into occupancy levels. So I began doing that. It will amaze some of you, I'm sure, but it's the main thing I've been working on since that last board meeting. The retail guidelines say that you begin with your certificate of occupancy. So then we had to say, those retail guidelines are prepared for businesses that are always under municipal control. We're under school district control and SED. So we interfaced with the district and with SED to find out where we get this certificate of occupancy. We got it from the school district, and it's a two-parter. It's a certificate of occupancy and a fire safety plan. The certificate of occupancy that SED releases does not have a person number on it. And it says, see the fire safety report. Our fire safety report also does not have a number of people that can be in the building on it. So today I spent some time on the phone with our colleague Barry Nelson, and after that some time on the phone with Dave Messer-Cola, who's the fire district administrator for the Guilderland fire service area, which is the one right near Noreen's house there on Willow. And Dave Messer-Cola told me, it should be on your wall somewhere in the building what the number of people you're allowed to have in there is. So Margaret did an extensive search today, and it's not around our building. So Dave says, call me back if you can't find it, and we can establish an occupancy level for you. There are occupancy levels that exist, or excuse me, there's one that exists for the Helderberg room. I will add that in addition to the people I've named, I've been in touch with our lawyers. I've been in touch with Tim Burke at Upper Hudson, the other library directors. Basically, once I can get this number from the fire department, it's probably going to be a lot like the other dead ends I faced in researching this, which is the numbers end up being impossibly high for the coronavirus era. So to get back to the, for example, the number of people that they say fit in the Helderberg room for our fire code is 212, okay? No matter how many times you slice that up, you're gonna have a hard time getting to below 50, because 50 is still the governor's limit on the number of people that can collect in one place for one purpose, right? So that 50 still exists, but the retail guidance, sorry, I'm almost done, talks about the aggregate number of people in the building between workforce and customers. And so our workforce is a total of 60, probably an average of 45 that are in the building at any given time during normal operations, and currently a high of 30 that are in the building at any given time. the various conversations I've had with architects and the engineer, construction manager this week and since the board meeting indicate that we could have as few as 5 and as many as 40 construction workers in the building at any given time, but probably an average of 14 during the construction process. And one final factor is that you guys can read this retail guidance just like I can, but here's the way I read it. It says the aggregate number between workforce and customers. You might want to define the workforce as people who work for Guilderland Public Library, but I think the intent behind that executive order is not to limit the number of workers in the building working for one agency, but to limit the number of human beings in the building. So to me, I think we would have no choice but to count the construction workers and the staff and any customers that we let in. And I don't think that even with reopening that some of you are hoping for, that we're going to be able to see any more than 10 or 15 at the outside patrons in the building at any one time for the duration of as long as COVID restriction stays in place. And, you know, that's my conclusion. I mean, I can approach it to a different way from a health point of view, but I wasn't asked to do that. I was asked to research the occupancy of the building. So tomorrow I'm going to call Dave Mezercola back and I'm going to say, yes, we need to establish an occupancy for our building. How soon can you get there to help us do that? He indicated today on the phone that he could get there the week starting September 8th. He was a little tied up before that with, I think, a vacation, if I remember right. But I spent 9 hours on the phone today with various people. So my details are a little bit jumbled, but you know, I think it's a false concept that there's anything I can do for you that returns the library to something resembling normalcy anytime soon. I think we're talking about a limited number of patrons if we're talking about patrons in the building at all.
Tim, a follow-up question to that. You're picking phase 2 in the retail establishment. I think churches opened under phase 4, and there certainly are more than 50 people in the larger churches that attend services. So why did you pick 2 versus 4? And that's the question, to be honest.
Sure. Okay. So I didn't pick phase 2. I don't even agree with phase 2, but the libraries in the Upper Hudson region, and I believe in the other 30-some regions in the state, all felt that they wanted to get safely reopened more quickly. So they chose phase 2 instead of phase 4. And now, again, I remember I said earlier that I was kind of rebuked by some fellow library directors after our last board meeting. So I just realized that I was giving you an assumption. So I need to label my assumptions when they are assumptions. But I didn't pick phase 2. Upper Hudson recommended that its member libraries pick it.
Okay.
I have a question for Tim, if possible.
Jason, I've got you and I've got Marcia up next. Barbara, does that conclude your questions?
I had one more last question. I certainly have heard from a number of our patrons that they were concerned about reopening even before this issue came up. Have you, and I know in the survey that you did even of the staff, that they mentioned that a number of patrons had approached them and said, you know, when are you guys going to reopen? To everybody understands to a limited extent. Have you also heard from the public these concerns as to when are we going to start reopening, like so many other the businesses and things in the community have done?
I have had 6 patrons contact me in that way, and since Caitlin took over as the board president, and I can't remember when Brian was president on this issue, but I just copy. They've all been by email, so I just write them back by email, and I copy Caitlin routinely on them. My conclusion, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, is that 5 of those 6 people seemed satisfied with my explanation, and the sixth person seems to be still pending. I know that he contacted one of our board members, and there's an ongoing conversation there. So I, have not heard an extreme clamor. I do the grocery shopping for my house. I take Ben to his sports, and I am involved at church every week. Other than those 6 people, nobody has approached me. I do want to just mention an idea that, and I think my staff knows that they should be running those things up the ladder, but I'll certainly mention it to them tomorrow when I have a staff meeting, that if they're getting that kind of feedback, that I need to hear it, whether it's people who want the library more open or people who have the opposite point of view. I need to get an aggregate sense of that. One of my fellow directors suggested that perhaps we survey the public and ask if they're happy with the approach we've taken so far. I haven't had time to work on that, but I'm not afraid to do that. You can do these simple polls on Facebook, or we have the constant contact email program that an email could be designed where we ask people to weigh in and see if they're happy up to this point. The difficulty, just if you consider that idea, the difficulty is here we are, 11 board members and a few staff members on this call. And, I feel like I have failed you in some respect in the past at telling you how complicated it is to open the library and what an opening looks like, because I do kind of get the sense that, I'm sorry to be so direct, but that some of you think we can just reopen. And I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can do that in the coronavirus crisis. And it's a little bit more complicated for us because any guidance that does exist is not written for buildings that are under construction, but just for buildings. And we've got an additional factor. So that's my answer. You can let me know what you think.
Caitlin, I just have one final question. I promise it's my last one. Kathy brought up the idea, and actually a few people in the community have shared this with me, that, if you guys aren't going to be providing services, when you come to a budget vote come next year, we're not going to support it. Now, I don't agree with that, but that certainly is a concern of mine. That, and Tim, I just wanted to get your feelings on it.
I think it was a very wise comment that Kathy made, I believe in an email earlier today. I'm not quite sure the medium, but it is a factor that I had not yet considered until Kathy brought it up. Again, I hope I'm not being disrespectful, but if you have had members of the community say that to you, you don't have to wait for a board meeting to tell me about it, because I haven't heard it.
All right. Thank you, Tim. I promise you're done, Barbara, for a minute.
Yes.
Thank you. Promise me, Jason. Thank you. And I saw you write them down. So go ahead.
Well, I had some questions from before about people working remotely. Maybe we discussed that earlier about goals or plans. Do we have how do we monitor productivity and what people are actually doing remotely? You mentioned that they're working on some of the sexual harassment trainings and things like that. But is there anything broader than that?
Thanks, Jason. Yes. So the department heads make the schedule, and they authorize some people to work from home when they make that schedule. The department heads meet once a week. So with me and Margaret and Carol. And so we keep an eye on that process that way. The people who are working from home are ordering books. They are planning programs. They're doing the Dial a Story service. We are doing online programming, and we are starting to create some programs that are in the discussion stage that'll take place in local parks rather than at the library, because they can be done outdoors. And so, for example, today I fielded a couple emails about a a flu clinic, flu shot clinic that could take place outside the building in early October. And, my only comment was, I didn't want to get involved in whether or not the library building was going to be open because this meeting hadn't happened yet. But I said, I am all for it. People should be able to get their flu shots, just have a rain date in case it rains on the first date that you were talking about. I think my memory's a little faulty, but I think that we're planning or trying to work on a cooking program that would take place in Tawasenta Park. And everything's more complicated right now because we had to go an extra step and talk to our insurance coverage to make sure that an event in a town facility held by a public library featuring a speaker from Cornell Cooperative Extension who was cooking that involved food. There were lots of questions like who's providing the food, what are the social distancing measures. So everything is taking a little more time, but the people are working to get that.
We're getting in a little of the weeds on the actual,
Right.
I think it's just asking about accountability.
Yes,
right.
Very much so. And I also wanted to know, are they also working on plans for the future for opening? Like, does this include how we're going to do things like social distance and things like that going forward? And have you been working on a policy or procedure? I know that you've been working on different ways to save money, but as far as us opening as a branch, I know you say it's very complicated, but is there anything that we can see as far as a plan for opening in the works from staff or anyone?
Sure. Let me go back to the accountability piece. So I did get sidetracked. The department heads all tell their employees that they need to do either a daily or a weekly report to them on what they are doing. And if they have any suggestions for work from home that the department head doesn't want to approve because they might be a little too off the mark of something that we need to pay people to do, they will come to me with a question about that. So some employees have a daily report, some employees have a weekly report. Those go to the department heads and the department heads keep them, but they do exist if we need them. Because when I asked you to make the decision in March or April, whenever we first met after the closure on March 13th, Margaret and I and Carol were all thinking about accountability, and so were the department heads. The department heads are working with the administration on the reopening plans, and they are separately getting input on that from their own employees. But I have not tasked any employee that is not a department head with working on a reopening plan.
All right. I just have a few more, and I'll make it quick. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is you did mention, and I thank you for looking into the occupancy of the room and what a number would be or what it would look like. I wanted to know, as far as the construction workers, wouldn't that be separate from everything else that's going on as far as the library, the employees, the Gilliland staff versus the people working on construction? They wouldn't be sharing the same space, would they? Or is that a question for Paul Mays?
I'm going to start and Paul can take over, but partly that depends on your decision if you make one tonight on this proposal, because there are provisions in the budget to build temporary walls and cover areas with plastic sheeting and so forth. And some of that would not be necessary if the building remained closed to patrons. There would be some people who were working on the roof or in the parking lot. So in essence, they don't need to be counted. But the fluidity of those workers, they'd be coming in and out of the building. They'd be coming in and out of the areas where staff work.
I know what.
Paul and
Okay,
Mays
I just want to add this.
So if there's something specific for Paul Mays, I have one question for him. If anything else specific for Paul, I want to try and get answered before he leaves. Do you have
I do want to ask just one or two other things.
I appreciate that. Mine is very specific for Paul, and he may say I have no idea. Presumably, if the square footage changes and the number of egresses change, due to construction, the occupancy of the building, the limitations on occupancy would change?
Yes, that's correct. Officially, that change would take place when you're issued a certificate of occupancy at the end of the project.
Okay, so it's not something that if a portion of the building is closed, we will have a lower occupancy rate for that period of the time because we have a smaller square footage of usable space.
I concur with what you're saying because it's not that sophisticated a calculation when it's taking into account those things. Contractors have to put together a safety work plan based on how many people are indoors in close proximity to each other in the areas they're working. But no, I think we would look at the area that you are continuing to occupy, which is going to remain relatively stable under the original plan. It just shifts around what those areas are. So in other words, we would build the addition,
answered.
things, so you would have the same number.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That was my specific Paul Mays question. Thank you, Paul and Megan.
I apologize. We had another meeting scheduled, but I want to make sure.
I have one more question for you, Paul. I apologize.
Okay, Jason, yes.
I thought it was gonna be more for Tim, but since you're going, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
As far as Tim mentioned like foot traffic, I feel like people are being flexible in our current situation, and I was wondering, would it be possible for the individuals doing construction to ensure that that they stayed out of the same space and they socially distanced or had like a different use a different entrance during construction? Is that something that's possible?
That's definitely something they would be doing anyway. Yes.
Okay.
Not only possible, but the construction manager should have that in the front end as a requirement because we want to prevent liability or injury to patrons and staff. Having said that, the overall calculation of the building is based on square footage numbers. But yes, there should be a barrier generally between staff and patrons, or between the workers, construction workers, and staff and patrons almost all the time.
Thank you. All right, and I have one last thing, and I'm done. And again, thank you, Tim, for looking into all of this. As far as people in the building, is there any way possible, and maybe this is a motion we'd have to make, to verify that, speak to someone legally as far as like how those people are counted when we come up to the number of to the occupancy number, because it does seem like they're not really even in the building. Like we had, so if that's possible, I mean, I don't know if we have to make a motion, but I definitely feel that would be something time will serve.
I don't think you need to make a motion. I think it's a good suggestion. I will figure out who wrote the phase 2 retail guidelines, reach out to them and say, what about buildings under construction? Do we need to include the construction workers? I also want to point out, and maybe Megan can jump in and explain this, but Megan did some calculations for us, and I took the calculations and I said, how does COVID-19 and social distancing impact this? And the standard way that occupancy rates are determined has to do with people having 50 square feet or 100 square feet around them, depending on whether they're seated or mobile. So in essence, occupancy levels don't change with social distancing because they're already sort of unrealistically high. So I don't know, Megan, if you can clarify that, or Paul.
Megan, do you want to tackle?
Sure. So the building code establishes set values for determining occupancy by space, and specifically for libraries, we consider reading areas, staff workspaces, stack areas, and meeting rooms according to these charts. So for library stack areas, the occupancy of like your adult collection space with all those tall stacks would be 1 person per 100 square feet, which should take into account the fact that there's a density of stacks there, so there's not going to be a large grouping of people.
Essentially a 10-foot by 10-foot cube.
And seating areas and staff workspaces are gauged by 1 person per 50 square feet, which would be like a 5 by 10 space, which seems fairly reasonable until you switch to program rooms and things like that that are having a heavier occupancy, where it's one person for every 7 square feet if you're doing just chair seating. So it's a little bit.
Which does not meet social distancing requirements.
Not at all.
Right.
So it's a tool that works on averages. So for stacks and seating areas, it seems practical to use as a guide. But then when we look at meeting room spaces, it would be almost impossible to comfortably put 212 people in your Helderberg room, which is what the code says you could have by square footage. So we've given Tim the guidelines, or we've used the guidelines to determine your seating areas and your stack spaces, what those square footages are, and what the theoretical occupancy would be based on those numbers. But he still needs to reconcile that with the COVID policies or for phase 2,
right,
and just what's feasible in terms of reallocating space for social distancing.
The code determines those numbers in order to determine exiting width and how to get people out of the building. So they create a high number that means that you have to be safer. You have to put more exits, for example. But they're not taking into account, of course, because the codes predate this, anything to do with the distancing questions that we're facing now. So it, as Megan said, it's not a realistic number other than it determines where our starting point is. And the COVID guidelines have been giving these opening percentages of the allowed code total. So 25% or 50%, depending on the phase and depending on the building type. Does that make sense?
All right, thank you so much, Paul and Megan. We really appreciate this in-depth, quick lesson on all things architecture and construction relating to libraries.
I apologize, we have to go to this other meeting, but
thank you guys.
We're happy. If you have other questions, please get them to Tim. He will get them to us, and we can answer by email over the next couple days if you'd like.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everybody.
Jason, did you have other questions that didn't involve Paul?
No, that was it. And thanks, Tim. That answered all my questions.
Next, I had Marcia for a question. Marcia, you're on mute.
Okay. I have to admit, I'm really confused. At the beginning of this conversation, my understanding was that what we were going to be bidding on or voting on, if we vote, is whether to bid this with the library open or the library closed. Did everyone else hear that?
Yeah, it's the library building, not the library itself, but the building to the public.
Okay, but we now know that the library is not going to be open because it's going to be open in a limited way. Even with our best efforts, the whole library is not going to be open. As Tim said, that it's going to be limited in term because of occupancy issues and other issues. So I don't know what the bid says. I've never seen the bid, but my understanding from this conversation is that the bid anticipates normal library operations. It anticipates operating except in times when, or disruption as little as possible. Is that correct? Because
originally the plan was to go to bid with normal library operations still taking place. Since the proposal and going through this process, the library building has been closed to the public and there has not been normal operations due to COVID unrelated to construction. And so the motion that is eventually going to be on the floor tonight is whether to write the bid as it was in normal times, that the library will be, the construction will be going on with the library open to the public, and that would be in whatever limited capacity COVID allows. So one is, not relating COVID and the construction project in that way. And the other option that's going to be is the other thing that would happen is that the building remains closed to the public, and the current operations post-COVID, or I guess during COVID, remain in place. So does that clarify at all? Sort of, there are COVID operating questions and there are construction operating questions. And as far as I know, the Brunswick Library in the Upper Hudson is the only library that also has a COVID plus construction situation. So we're going into two different things, but they could be related, you know, and so we're looking at is, do we bid the library building closed to the public, or do we bid the library building open to the public?
But opened in a limited manner.
Unrelated, but yes, it would be limited. So as long as COVID persists, there would be a limited operation to the based on current guidelines. That could all change. We don't know when it will change. We don't know what it will change to.
Mm-hmm. Who's actually writing the bid?
Tim?
The bid documents are prepared by honestly, it's going to sound terrible. It's either Turner Construction or the architect. I think it's Turner Construction.
But Tim, I thought we were supposed to be going to bid tomorrow.
We were, and in fact, the documents are in possession of the architect. They're the ones who are going to release them to the public today. They called me to ask me if they should, and I said, since we have the, so that answers the question, actually. I know that that they prepared them. I was just momentarily kind of struggling with the question, but yes, they are ready to go from the architect.
In either case.
Right.
So they have two bids prepared.
No, I'm sorry. They have only prepared the bid documents that are kind of the old idea, the first idea that we were comfortable with up until last week when I came up with this new idea. So what they wanted to do today, and I said, no, not until at least tomorrow, is put the project out to bid with the concept that the library is open. They call it occupied versus unoccupied. And they said they could change it later based on your decision, if you made that decision, via an addendum. So what they think they would need to write is an addendum if this idea were to be adopted. They are slightly uncomfortable with that because they'd kind of rather just put out a bid for what the project is rather than change it one day or 1 week after putting it out. So.
Well, you know, unfortunately, the Turner people are not on the phone. We have really no sense of, you know, the occupancy question is still open. The question of time and money savings is still open as far as I'm concerned. I would like to see the library open because I think the public deserves it and expects it. But unless somebody can tell me that.
Marcia,
yes.
Is there a question that you have for Tim?
Then I'll drop it right now. But I'm just saying we still have a lot of variables that have not been met to my satisfaction. So I'm sorry about the comment, but I'll withdraw it and save it for the end.
Okay. So that being said, are there other questions from board members? I see no hands, but I also can't see Brian or Peter. So Kathy, yes.
I'm good.
I just have one question. So what, during construction, what happens to the collection? And if you were going to use the Helderberg room as a place for patrons to use materials, how many materials would you put in there? Because I assume that during the construction, you have to put your materials away somewhere or you have to do something with them. So would there be room in the Helderberg room for a lot of that?
So, my answer to you would be kind of just so during construction as originally envisioned, the materials would presumably be covered when they needed to be. So the construction is designed modularly so that the first thing they do is they build the new space. Once they build the new space, they were going to move the children's department materials and furnishings into the new space. Some of it would be new furnishings rather than old. And then that would give them the existing children's department space for them to do their update work on. Once that was finished, the building's divided into 5 zones. So they keep moving out of a zone and moving, opening that zone once it's finished with new materials. So the majority of the stacks, will be just covered with plastic sheeting when they need to be protected from dust. And that is a good example of something that the architects told me today. They said, generally tradespeople work from 6:30 or 7 in the morning until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And when they leave, they have to spend the last hour of their day making the space back ready for whatever it's normally used for if it's open. So, the plastic sheeting that was covering the collection materials when they were working in the ceiling above it, under the original plan, I gather would be installed every morning and removed every evening if we expected patrons to browse those shelves. In either model, there's going to be times when some portion of the collection is not accessible to either patrons or staff. The Helderberg room, the best answer I can give you there is you can get quite a lot of stuff in there, but obviously nothing like our full collection. So it would be similar to the concept we discussed recently, where we'd put, new materials, bestseller material, children's material, all of the high traffic or high volume demand type stuff. So you'd have novels in there, but they'd be new novels, not necessarily every novel that, Patterson ever wrote, but maybe the 10 or 12 copies of his current one that we tend to get, So it'd be a limited selection, but I like it personally in the Helderberg room more than I like the proposal that staff brought us recently about the Normanskill room, just because the room's roughly twice as big, so you can get roughly twice as much stuff in there. So we do our best is what I would tell you, but I don't think we know till we put it in there how much we can get in there. I do know that Brian has a bookcase in his garage that I want because I might need it temporarily. So
I'm happy to help the library in any way I can.
Thank you.
All right. Does that answer? I think that was Kathy's question. I see Richard with a hand up. Kathy, satisfactory?
Yeah, I guess that answered my question.
Okay.
Room.
Richard?
Is a motion appropriate at this point? Not to cut off the discussion, but rather to give some direction to it.
So, I had that thought myself that I think, I want to do one thing first. I am on the New York State Library Trustees Handbook, and the responsibilities of trustees are broad in scope. But the things that really apply to this meeting are to exercise fiduciary responsibility for the use of public and private funds, to maintain a facility that meets the library's and the community's needs. And I want to remind all of the trustees that you can be in favor of an idea and vote no on a motion if you feel you don't have enough information to make the decision. Yes, Richard.
With that in mind, I would like to make a motion if it would be acceptable.
So Richard is making a motion. What is your motion?
My motion is that at the present time, we survey the Guilderland Library constituency.
I'd like to second that.
Meaning patrons, by the most effective and visible means as determined by administration. And the results of that survey come back to us no later than 14 days from today, at which time we will reconsider this question.
I'd like to second that.
All right. I am just going to. I have a motion by Richard, and I just want to make sure I've got Jason as a second. I'd like Kathy to read it back for the minutes.
And I would just like the opportunity to be the first discussant if it does get a second.
Everybody, it's already got a second.
It's got a second. All right. It's Jason is the second. Barbara, I see your hand. I'm going to have Kathy read it back for us, just to make sure we've all got it very clear for the minutes.
Okay. I have that Richard made a motion that we survey patrons by the most effective means and that we receive the results of that survey within 14 days from today, at which point we reconvene. And
the most effective and visible means, if we could, is determined by administration.
Okay. I was trying to write as fast as I could.
Yep. And again, I would appreciate the courtesy of being the first one to discuss my motion if I could.
And I believe you said not just patrons, but the constituency. Would that include non-patrons?
I would like to include any. Oh, that's a very good question. I think it should include anyone who wants to respond to the survey.
Okay, so not just patrons, but the constituency.
Correct. The broader constituency.
I saw Barbara had a hand up. Hold on, I'm keeping. Barbara had a hand up. Mark had a hand up.
It was Jason second?
Jason was the second on that.
Okay.
I know that Richard wants to discuss it. I do want to keep in mind that at some point tonight, we do need to know if we're going to bid tomorrow and how we're going to do it. So if we're waiting for the results of the survey by this motion, it seems like that the other motion will depend on the results of.
No, I think it's inherent in my motion, if I could just amend it, is that any bid wait until the board considers the survey.
Okay, so you'd like to wait until the results of the survey for any bid?
We have to.
Okay.
In order to make the survey usable and valid.
Just for the record, you'd like your, I got really tiny at my desk. The motion to read that we survey the constituency by the most effective and visible means is determined by administration, with the board to receive those votes in 14 days time, and to wait for the results before we go to bid.
Right, for the board to consider and give approval to go to bid.
Can I hear what Mark has to say, please?
So I just want to make sure that Richard, you are satisfied with the motion that's on the table, and Jason, you're still the second. Okay. Mark.
Yeah, I just want to clarify.
May I discuss first?
I think Rich wanted to speak on his motion.
Yeah, thank you.
I
appreciate that. Caitlin, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to keep some sort of
Yeah,
order
no. And I put the motion forward for the following reason. I came in here tonight ready to vote to close the library and to get the construction done. All of the reasons that were given to us were very valid reasons. And then when I heard the timetable and realized that we would be closed till next July rather than August, and when I heard that we had a school budget vote during that time, and when I heard some other things, I realized that we, in our fiduciary responsibility, really represent the residents of the town of Guilderland. And I think making this decision without hearing what the residents of the town of Guilderland think is presumptuous on our part, and I also don't think it's discharging our responsibilities the way we should. I think it better to wait 2 weeks to 3 weeks until we can reconvene. We can then go back to the public and say we looked for your opinions, we genuinely wanted them, and we took them into account before we made this decision. I think at that point, BBL will be back. We can get some more specific answers to our questions, and it gives us a little bit of breathing room before we go ahead. And it also gives us some currency to use with the public if we make a decision different than the one that some of them wanted.
Okay, not on mute. So thank you, Richard. I've got Barbara and Mark. Barbara, do you mind if we go Mark? We've heard nothing from him this whole meeting, and I'm intrigued.
I just thank you. So I just want to make sure that the survey is clear on what we're searching for. As far as does the public want to open? Do they want it to stay closed during construction? I'm all for the survey. I just want to make sure we have a clear direction with the survey. The other thing I want to make sure I ask, and I might have missed one of the meetings, but I don't recall seeing a reopening plan. And if there is one, I'd like to be able to take a look at it and maybe have that within the next 14 days so that we can vote on it as a board. Because if we stay open, I think we still need to open even in a COVID environment, what that ever is going to look like. Just wanted to make that comment, and that's it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mark. Barbara?
2 things. One of which, if we wait 2 to 3 weeks to reconvene, you've now pushed it out another month or 2 to the completion of the potential completion of the project. Secondarily, if you put out a survey, question answer survey, you can have forces out in the community who are either positive or negative that can just bombard that survey. And I think all of us live in the community. We've talked to people in the community. I grant you that we didn't have much notice to the community about the possibility of staying closed for a year and a half or more. But surveys really can be problematic. They can be useful, but I think I would depend upon what I've heard from my fellow citizens more so than a survey that can be padded.
Richard?
I would just say that a survey of your friends, with all due respect, is not anywhere scientific. You know, and I think we all tend to associate with folks who are like-minded to some degree or another. I think the public relations value of this survey is one of the main reasons I suggested it, because this was done very quickly, and we would be making a decision within several days, which for this degree of a decision, I don't think is a wise thing to do. So if the survey, we don't have to go by the survey, but we need, in my mind, to do the survey to show our openness to public comment.
Barbara?
Just a follow up to that, if we don't go out to bid for another 3 weeks to 4 weeks, our dream of actually enclosing the additional children's area by winter probably has gone down the tubes.
I'm not sure about that, but you know, that's what BBL will help us with.
Kathy?
I think that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that it would be very difficult to make a decision right now. a decision to close the library until next August. I mean, a year from now. I mean, I think that's a very difficult decision, especially since Turner Construction wasn't even part of this meeting. And so we don't really have a real, I mean, we don't have enough information to make a decision right now. I mean, if I had to make a decision right now, I'd say I'd have to vote against it because I just don't have enough information to make a what I consider a very considered decision to close the library for that length of time. So I'm not opposed to a delay. If we're being asked to make this decision to, in essence, shut it. I mean, a year from now, it might still be closed. So, I mean, that's a long time. So, and a lot of things can happen in that period of time. So, that's just, you know, I don't think a delay on making that decision would be a terrible thing.
Okay, I have Jason, then Mark.
Yeah, I was
Then
gonna.
Brian.
I was just gonna add to what.
Jay, you're on mute.
I was saying, I wanted to get back to what Kathy said earlier about like this will, you know, give us options. Like, you know, I don't know if it's what kind of poll we're going to do, but if there is input, maybe, you know, someone may want to see, may have a different vision of what we look like open, or maybe like, you know, we will do the partial thing. But I definitely feel like we typically put more time into making decisions like this. And it seemed like, you know, this was in haste. I don't think that like, you know, it was a matter of right now. It's like, all right, you know, we're going to add like an extra month to the project. And I know Barb's concerned with that and, you know, with getting that filled in and closed. But with that being said, if we were to vote, I would have to say, like, you know, to not necessarily remain open, but not to close, because we don't know what the environment's going to look like. And I feel that if we at least leave the option to remain open, why wouldn't we do that for the public?
Thank you, Jason. Mark?
Yeah, so right now with no vote, is it my understanding that it would go to bid? Because that was our intention in the first place. I think we already made that decision maybe a couple meetings ago. So we either need to vote that we don't send it to bid and wait on the results. I'm asking. Or if we make no vote tonight, it goes to bid. And then if we change our mind later, we can do an addendum. Is that correct?
Mark, my motion includes not going to bid until we see the results of the survey.
Okay.
I have Brian.
Thank you. So I really do like the idea of a survey. I spent most of the weekend trying to talk to as many people as I could, and you know, Richard is right. Like you're going to get a very limited sample of who you get. So a survey is a good idea. I guess my only concern with it is, are we losing a lot of the benefit of closing and getting the library done early if we're just going to wait a couple weeks, and then we're, you know, then if we decide to close, the document's going to be changed, and all of a sudden it'll be a month later and we lost the month. So I guess that's my only concern with it. Although I agree with basically everyone who said this, is that I don't feel like I have enough information. It's not anyone's fault. You know, it's just kind of the situation we're in. And I certainly would benefit from more information. I just don't know if we lose the benefit if we take too long. So that was my thought. I don't know if there's any comments to that from Tim. I was looking for like maybe a comment from Tim if yeah.
And I also recognize Barbara had her hand up. Brian, would you like a comment from Tim? It looks like he's got a limited.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing. If we do a survey, we got to do this well. With all due respect, that email that went out and kind of the what's on our website right now about the construction project to save money and time, where it doesn't mention, you know, the possible closing. let's just do as fair a survey as you can possibly do. I guess that's all I ask. You know, I being in politics, you can certainly do surveys, you know, in the way you want. I would just plead that we survey in the fairest way so we can get the best information. Yeah. What was my original thought? Tim, do you think like waiting a couple weeks to maybe even more to make a decision on bid, do we lose some of the benefits from deciding tonight?
My understanding is that while that is true, I do like Richard's motion, but I do believe that it takes away the time-sensitive benefit of the decision that was brought to the table tonight, and also takes away, I mean, it was already a gamble to get that thing framed, that new room framed before the winter weather comes. So either way that we go forward, that is a gamble, but we'll be going forward more slowly if we wait 2 weeks for the result of a survey. I have one quick other comment, which is that tomorrow is the deadline for the Upper Hudson Library System construction grant. And so other than speaking with the staff in an hour to two session in the morning, that's all I can do tomorrow is finalize that grant, which if we're successful, will get us $131,000. So that needs to be my focus for tomorrow. With that said, I think that perhaps I guess I would just make the open comment that I would welcome some involvement from any interested board members helping to design the survey. It would be helpful to get some multiple perspectives into it.
I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Tim. Barbara, I see your hand. I want to encourage board participation in the survey. I think that's something Tim needs. So Barbara.
I want to point out just a couple of things. The bid documents are already prepared. They're very expensive to prepare. If you are to change those bid documents, it's not going to just be a matter of our not meeting until 3 weeks. There are change orders and there are expenses that go with those change orders. So if we vote for this motion, then we are basically saying that we're going to increase our costs knowingly because of the change orders. So the bid documents are going to have to be revised or amended, which will cost money. Plus, there is no way under the sun that you can proceed on our current timetable if we proceed with this delay. So I guess I would encourage people not to vote for this particular motion, but go back to the motion why we're here. Do we want to stay open? Do we want to close? Because by doing this, we are just kicking the can down the road and going deeper and deeper into our closing scenario and increasing our costs with the change orders and the bid documents that have to be redone or amended.
Anybody got anything at this point?
So
Can I make?
I've got Noreen, then
Sorry. Can I make a comment, not a question?
Yes.
Richard, what personally, while like Caitlin said, you may like an idea, you know, the UE. I like the idea of a survey. I'm always for getting people's opinions and what their perspective is on the matter. I feel like the reason we're here tonight is to, and I know the questions cannot be answered, a lot of our questions, but what I'm getting is that it would save money, probably, be ahead of schedule, probably. And I had some other things that I wanted to say that I can say for the end, but I feel like if me personally, if we don't vote tonight, then I just don't feel like what we're doing right now is really going to matter a month from now in terms of all the things we listed. And that's nobody's fault. It's a matter of a time thing and the world that we're in right now. You know what I mean? You know, the pandemic and everything has thrown everything for a loop, and sometimes we think of things later rather than sooner. And I think that's what happened. So I'm all for the survey, but I think it would just make this a moot point at this point. So I just wanted to respectfully say that.
Thank you, Noreen. Mark?
I'm good. Noreen said it.
Yeah, unfortunately, while I think the optics of a survey, regardless of result, would greatly benefit the board, I think, you know, we have to take an action as a board. That's why we're here to have this meeting. And it can go either way, but I think Noreen's right that waiting 2 weeks to make this decision would nullify any effects that it might have. Did anyone else want to speak on the motion, on Richard's motion that's on the floor? Okay, since this is quite an issue, is anyone opposed to, just so I can be very sure and very clear, anyone opposed to a roll call vote?
Good idea.
Caitlin, I just wanted to jump in, just say that there's been several comments on Facebook.
Okay.
If in case everyone wants to hear what the comments are that are coming in and not wait till the end, it's up to you.
Well, since this is a motion about a public survey, should we hear what the public has to say?
Absolutely.
So, Luann, if you would, you have the floor.
Thank you. All right, so I'll just read the comments that are coming in right now. We have keeping the library closed is not a good public relations plan. As part of the Guilderland community, I think the residents need an opportunity to give our 2 cents. This is the first I have heard about closing the library for construction. The library has continued to provide excellent services to the community amidst the pandemic, but closing for a year seems hasty, especially without community input. Has anyone caught if this would be a full closure of the library or just the facilities use with a continuation of curbside checkout services? Expanded curbside to include weekends is on the table during the extended closure. Suggestion, have paper surveys available at your curbside table that list the stakes involved in community input. Closing the library for a year is a big step. Of course, the public should be asked what they think. The library told the public the library was vital and the voters passed a large bond issue for expansion. How can they now claim it is okay to close the library for 18 months? And that's what I got.
Thank you, Luann. So I think one of those struck me as important as board members. We keep talking about the library being closed, and I think we need to make a very clear distinction that the building would remain closed to the public, that the library would continue offering our COVID time services on an expanded basis. I want to make that clear for the board, for the public, that it's the building itself. The library would not cease the current services that we are providing. In fact, those services would be expanded. Richard.
I just wanted to read something from a sister library in Bethlehem in their column in the Enterprise from August 20th, and I found this very pertinent today as I was catching up. Just 2 paragraphs. Public meeting spaces will not be available, nor will access to computers and other in-house library technology. Children's toys and library seating have been removed, and patrons will be asked to wear masks and limit their time inside the library to selecting and checking out their materials. This will be a big change for all of us who come to see the library as a place to gather with friends and neighbors. We know these days will return, and we are so grateful to all of you for your patience and good humor as we figure out how to be your best library while protecting patient health. I thought those two paragraphs summed it up really well. And I think whatever we decide to do with this motion, the most important part of it will be to try and align the public perception with the reality of what we're doing and understand the reasons behind it. So I think it's as much public relations and messaging as anything else about what we did and why we did it. But I just thought those two paragraphs were very pertinent because this is going on everywhere.
I appreciate that, Ruben. Sorry, Richard. Peter?
I just want to share here quickly that I'm all for surveys. I definitely think the biggest concern I had in this whole situation that it was in such short notice and the general public really didn't know what was going on. And that was a big concern of mine. That being said, if we do this motion, pushes it out 2 weeks, possibly 3 weeks, kids start school starting next week. I would like to see us make a decision here to get this building open sooner than later. So part of it's related to COVID, part of it's related to the construction here. But the further we kick this out, it's a big disadvantage to the students and the kids in our community. So I would just prefer that we kind of vote on the issue that we came into this meeting to really deal with and not postpone it any longer.
Okay, is there still motion on the floor? And is there any more comment on the motion that's on the floor? I see none. So I'm going to read the motion back, and then I'm going to do a roll call vote. If you don't mind, just unmute. And I want to remind all the board members that once we begin a vote, you can no longer voice your opinion about why you're voting a certain way. It should be yay, nay, or abstain. And that is per the law on meetings. There's a motion by Richard, second by Jason, to survey the constituency by the most effective and visible means as determined by the administration with results within 14 days, and for the board to consider, and we wait for those results before we go to bed. I'm going to go in the order that I've sort of got you listed here already. Barbara.
No.
Brian.
No.
Kathy.
No.
Jason. I didn't catch that, Jay. Marcia. Marcia, I didn't catch your vote. Can you unmute?
No.
Mark? Mark?
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Noreen?
No.
Peter?
No.
Richard?
Yes.
And Caitlin is no. So the motion on the floor does not pass. And so I think we need to move to the next motion. Is there a motion to
I would make a motion to proceed with the bid documents as drafted.
I second that. Narine.
Okay, so we've got Bart to proceed with the bid documents as drafted, and that would be under that works under the premise that the building is open to the public, and that is a second by Noreen.
Right, to the degree that we can safely.
Sure. So I'm gonna go with this roll call again. If you'll.
Whoa! Can we just
discussion?
discuss the motion?
Well,
Because we said we are going to give opinions at one point, and this probably would be the time to do it.
I do that in order and be brief, and just give everybody a small chance to speak, because I think some people have, I'm not sure if there's anyone who's not ready to vote, but I do want to make sure everyone's opinions are heard. So I'll go in order again, brief opinion, and then we'll bring it to a vote once all the board members have had an opportunity to speak. So first on my list is Barbara.
I would certainly support the motion. I think from a PR standpoint and from the promises that we made to the community, we have to proceed as planned. Peter pointed out very nicely that our school children will be coming back to school. Granted, furniture and things like that will be removed, but we will still allow, hopefully in time, our patrons to come in, including our students, to get the books that they need and take them home and do their work there. We won't be able to obviously have the padded chairs that we can't, disinfect, but I'm much more comfortable proceeding this way with promises made to the public. And so that come voting time in May, they'll see that we're doing everything possible to accommodate them to the degree that we can do it safely. And so therefore I support the motion.
Thank you, Barbara. Brian.
Thank you. So, personally, I think I could have supported the indoor closure of the library if I thought the financial benefits of it would outweigh the kind of loss of services, but we just don't have enough information. We've hit on it multiple times. Marcia's mentioned it, Narine's mentioned it. We just don't have enough information at this point to do that. And just a quick story about the services. So today I went to a couple libraries that are open. Colony, phenomenal. Just really great job, Tim. If you have a chance to talk to them at your library meetings, I really think they do a great job over there. So at 10 o'clock today, I ordered a book from the Gildan Library to pick up, and then I went to the Colony Library first. I walked right in, got my book at the Colony Library and left. It really wasn't, it was not packed at all, but it really wasn't empty either. It was a good amount of people. They did a good job. I still haven't gotten my email back that my book is ready for the Gildan Lobby. And that's not a critique to, I know you guys are doing your system as best you can, but when you are open, you can just walk in and grab what you need. And as opposed to, waiting a couple days. So, so I just think the benefits, the benefits aren't strong enough yet to go ahead and close. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Kathy.
Just to confirm from my notes, the motion was by Barbara, seconded by Noreen to go to bid and not close the building.
Yes, it's the go to bid with the documents as they're currently written, which is under the assumption that the building is occupied.
Okay. Yes, I'm in favor of that. I mean, I had said before that I just don't think we have enough information to justify closing the building for a year.
Caitlin?
Yes, Noreen?
I'm so sorry. I may have misunderstood Barbara, where I agreed to continue with what we started off with tonight, but not necessarily, I thought we were going to discuss now whether we were in favor of staying open or not. So I apologize for misunderstanding that.
That's okay. We're here to decide about the bid.
Okay.
And the bid is currently written that the library will be occupied. We don't know what that looks like because of COVID at this point. Mark has asked that Tim come up, produce for the board a reopening plan. Mm-hmm. I think he said within 14 days, because that was the motion on the floor. Right. Once that failed, it may be sufficient to say at the next board meeting, we need to see a reopening plan. I see Mark nodding. So the bid as presented is that the library will be occupied.
Okay, because by me saying yes, I still haven't decided on that. So sorry about the confusion.
That's okay. It is, Kathy just spoke, we're on to Jason. Okay, mute.
I was saying I wish we had more time. I really did want to get the public input, but I totally I think that we should go forward with the bid. It seems like you know, as far as safety, we really should be looking to create a plan for how we are going to open. I'm sure there's lots of different ways to model it, and I'm sure Tim is going to be thinking of everyone's safety first. But I feel comfortable going forward, and you know, when the time comes to remain open or be open in the interior and in addition to curbside for those who may not want to come in just yet. So I feel really good about this. Like I said, the only thing I regret is that we didn't have more time to get the public's input, but I feel like they made it very clear when we passed the bond that you know, they wanted it to remain open. I know that the environment changed with COVID, but that was the initial plan, and I feel like, you know, we should continue with that, and we should be trying to figure out a way to open.
Thank you, Jason. Marcia, you are please unmute and speak.
I think that, you know, I will vote in favor of keeping the building open, but I have just a number of comments. I'm new to this board. I think this process has been not very good. We don't have enough information. I think as a matter of duty to the public and what's gone before, we have to vote that the building is to remain open. However, I strongly suggest that, well, I asked, I think the last time, to see what the bid looks like. I haven't seen it. I don't know anybody on this phone who has seen it, but that, to say that the building remains open is going to give us the highest possible cost for a bid. So that should be the outside number, because it anticipates, as I understand it, the building is open and normal operations of a library. That's not what's going to happen here. So the bid that we're going to be getting is as if the library is operating under normal conditions. I hope the bid takes into consideration that that is not going to be the case, and that with Tim's hybrid or limited opening. And so there are going to be a lot of loose ends here. And I'm a lawyer by profession, and I don't like loose ends. So without seeing the bid, without understanding the other variables that we don't know, I mean, you know, if Turner were on the phone, maybe they'd say it saved 6 months and $500,000. That's probably not the case, but we don't know that to be true. So I will vote yes, because I think in keeping with our public responsibility, the library should stay open. But what open means is really up for grabs, and nobody here knows really what that means. So we may have to amend this bid. And when it goes out, I think it should be made very clear that this is a bid to keep it open, but it's going to be subject to amendment and discussion.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to vote yes on this. Part of the reason is, one, you know, the public wasn't anticipating us having the library closed for 16 to 18 months. We haven't quite figured out, you know, the pay on the employees if we shut it down. There's a lot of different things that are kind of still out there. I believe, I think the survey would have been good, Richard. I just think, and I saw some of the comments, that I think it's just timing and, you know, the quick nature of it that we have to make this decision. But I think the survey would have been great if we had more time to do it. But I think we should move forward with the bid the way it is. You know, if we get some information and we want to amend it later, I think there's a possibility to do that, it sounded like. But I think right now we just need to make a decision on moving forward.
Thank you, Mark. Peter?
So I'll be voting yes on this. A couple things we need to make sure that we're making sure that our staff and patrons are safe. And I think we've gotten some good guidance on how to do that. I'll back up what Mark said, and Jason also mentioned it too, about having a reopening plan. I know that we have the curbside and we're kind of saying that's being open. But I think when most people are talking about being open, they're talking about actually walking in the building structure. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to have some solid plan. Today I went to Farnsworth Middle School to bring my daughter over, and I walked through that building. There was a great process to go in. I went to a classroom that was probably about 2 times the size of the Tower Center room, and there were 10 desks inside there, so I'm assuming 10 students and 2 teachers. So I'm hopeful we can figure a way to fit more of our staff who work at the library into the 8,730 square feet that we currently have. Very important also for the students to be able to access the library. There's going to be a bunch of students who are not going to school because they've sat down with their families and decided that it's safer for them to be at home, and that's an option that they have. We need to make sure that they have resources available through the library to be able to do the things they need to do to be successful in school. And I also think we could also follow the example of the town of Guilderland, whether it's at the parks. I was in town hall this week. They have a process. We could talk to them and see exactly what they're doing and just follow their lead as well. And the last thing on this is, the key thing for me was there's no guarantee that we're going to save any money or that we're going to save any time. And also, the general public does not expect us to be closed for that period of time. Today, I was reading an article that was written on May 9th. And in that, Tim, I'm going to mention you here, but it said in the Altamont Enterprise said, if voters pass the project, Wiles said construction will not interfere with the ongoing library activities. The library will be open most of the time. That's what we told the public. That's what they expect. And that's why I'm going ahead with a yes vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Richard.
Just 2 points. I will also be voting yes, and the reason is very succinct. In the absence of knowing what the community feels, our responsibility is to do the thing that serves the community best. And I think serving the community best as a library means being open to the best extent we can. So I think, Marcia talked about not having enough information. We certainly don't. And when you don't have enough information, you need to go with the safest option. And I think this is the safest option for the community. The second thing I wanted to say is I wanted to thank Tim and the staff, the administration. I think when Tim came up with this idea, he knew it was a hornet's nest and it would create a ton of work for him, but he brought it forward anyway. And I very much appreciate the creativity, in bringing something like this forward.
Thank you, Richard. And that just leaves me. And I want to take to heart what Marcia said, that, by going ahead with the bid as planned, as it's currently written, to work in an occupied building, it gives us the worst possible budget and the best possible option for services, regardless of what happens. And I think the balance of service and safety is something that we've all been striving for. And by going with the bid as written, it gives us that the most options to be able to continue to find that balance. I wanna thank Tim for all the time he spent with me on the phone and answering all of the questions. And I really want to thank the board. This is my 3rd meeting as president, and this is what we're talking about. And so I just want to thank everybody for, being orderly and appreciating that, I tried to find a way to do this so we'd all be heard. And just these opinions, it seems like we're ready to vote on this motion. And I think it's less contentious than I thought. So I appreciate you all so much. Noreen?
I'm sorry. I just, and this was a hornet's nest, and Caitlin, you did beautifully. You really did. So thumbs up completely.
Thank you.
Why was the bar set so low? Why did you anticipate it was going to be fireworks?
My bar is not low. It's just this Monday.
It's Monday.
That being said, I think I have something else I'd like to say.
I just wanted to know, and just to clarify for me, because I've had so much information coming at me, that if we vote yes, are we voting for all of the floor to stay open? Of course, not the construction, but the part for the public? Or would we still need to decide on whether this would be like a hybrid opening or not?
So this right now is about the bid. It's not actually about the opening plan for COVID. It's about the construction bid. The bid documents need to go out as the building is occupied or unoccupied. It was originally written as occupied. Currently, the building is not occupied by definition by the public. Tim thought, how does this change things for us? We need to discuss it. And so what the bid on the floor is to go to the motion on the floor is to go with the bid as written that the building would be occupied. It has nothing to do yet with the actual reopening of the building because of COVID.
So that is not set in stone. We don't know what that looks like.
Correct. It just leaves us that option.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody clear? Are we ready to go to a vote? Yes. Awesome. I'm gonna roll call again just for the sake of keeping track. Barbara, are you in favor?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Marcia? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Whoop.
Saying something, we can't hear.
Tell it on mute.
I'm trying. Marcia, you're on mute.
The answer is yes, and I just want to say I was.
Yes, no, we just have to vote. There's a rule that we can't opinion, it just has to vote. Richard brought it to my attention. Mark?
Yes.
Noreen? Peter?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And Caitlin? Yes. And so at 8:34, it passes unanimously. We will go to bid as written, as it is with the plan of being an occupied building. Oh my goodness, y'all guys are great. So is there any more discussion, or is there a motion on the floor?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, Tim, thanks for bringing this because it's not easy to be in your shoes and navigate a staff and the public and COVID all together. So, we appreciate you bringing this, and I don't want to be you right now. So,
Hey, Noreen, thank you. And don't forget, I have to navigate a board too.
yes.
We were easy. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
We have, Caitlin, do we have public input or not at the end here?
Yeah, we
Hello?
Yeah.
Or 5.
We have more public input, I guess. You're right, Peter. We did it a little bit before, but that was out of the agenda. So on the agenda, we have public input. Is there any?
Hello?
Calling user 5. Hello?
Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, this is County Legislator Mark Grimm representing Guilderland. I'm sorry I wasn't able to speak at the beginning of the meeting, but there was a problem with the phone system. But there's a couple of thoughts I did have. I want to thank a number of the board members who spent some time with me this weekend discussing this issue. And I'm glad, I think you voted in a way that I think was the way to go tonight. I do have some concerns. What I did hear from tonight from the director is really, for me, a lack of resolve about opening the library in a way that's going to serve the greater number of patrons. I just feel like we're behind the times. I think we should have been more open already, given that we've had 6 months. There are other libraries that are open, and I think the mission of the library is to serve their constituencies, and I just think we could be serving more. So I'd like to see the board push the administration to get a little bit more done in terms of the opening. And because I think the idea of closing the library for 18 months was a very poor idea, especially when the library put their reputation on the line and went to the public and said, hey, we want to ask you for millions of dollars because we really believe in the library, and we want to expand. And the public said yes, and the people rule. So one thing I was concerned about in the public notice about this, there was no mention that this was a vote to keep the library open or closed. That certainly should have been in the public notice, and if more people had seen that, I think you would have seen more participation on Facebook tonight. Because the people I talked to, they weren't aware that the library was even considering closing the library for another year, which I think would have brought quite a bit of pushback on the board. I think the discussion was very good tonight. I've learned a lot on this issue over the last few days. And I know everyone there is very earnest, and they were all following their conscience. So I want to commend everybody, and I enjoyed the discussion very much.
Thank you, Mark. I know that Tim has apologized and said he should have been more clear in the public notices that went out.
Yeah, but that was pretty central to the vote. I mean,
permissible.
Yeah. It was the central issue tonight. And
also, I hear you.
Hopefully there won't be a repeat of that.
Correct. I think Tim has admitted an error and has learned from this. And one of our board members, Mark, we've asked the director, and we've instructed the director that at the next board meeting he'll present to the board a reopening plan for the library.
Very good.
Please expect that coming, and we'll be working with him on that as well. So it will be coming in the September meeting, which is just only a few weeks away.
Very good. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Mark. Luann, is there any public comment via any of our other mediums?
That's it for now. We did get quite a few tonight, more than definitely usual, but there is nothing new since last time I talked.
Okay. Thank you, Peter, for making sure that we got that in there. Like I said, I also need to be kept on my toes. And
then I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second it. Mark is second.
Mark is the second. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.